This is the story of how one administrative error at Paramount Pictures destroyed what should have been a legendary action movie career. Jeff Speakman had everything: the martial arts credentials, the movie star looks, a hit debut film, and a studio deal that was supposed to make him the next Van Damme. But then someone at the studio made a single mistake with a script and his entire future vanished overnight. A career that went from a $14 million theatrical hit to direct-to-video obscurity in less than 2 years, and the script that got away became Speed, the movie that made Keanu Reeves a superstar and earned $350 million worldwide. That was supposed to be Jeff Speakman's second movie, the one that would have cemented his place among the action elite, but instead it became the defining moment of everything he'd never get to be. We're diving into one of Hollywood's most brutal what-if stories, where talent and timing meant absolutely nothing against studio politics and pure bad luck. Before we get to the drama, you need to understand who Jeff Speakman actually was, because this wasn't some random guy who stumbled into a lucky break. Jeffrey Speakman was born November 8, 1958 in the Chicago suburbs, and right from the start he showed this natural athletic ability that most people spend years trying to develop. At John Hersey High School, he became an All-American springboard diver who set district and conference records without ever having a diving coach, which when you think about it is absolutely insane. The kid was competing at an elite level with zero professional training, just raw talent and determination. College took him to Missouri Southern State, where he graduated with honors, a bachelor's degree in general psychology with a minor in biology. But the journey took 6 years, because he paid his own tuition without borrowing a single dollar. The whole time he's working to fund his education, he's also diving deep into martial arts, after the TV show Kung Fu sparked something in him that wouldn't let go. His college roommate was a black belt under this legendary master named Lou Angel, and that connection opened the door to Goju-Ryu karate. By 1980, Speakman had earned his black belt, and by graduation he'd reached second degree, training with an intensity that suggested he knew this was going to be more than just a hobby. Summer of 1983 brought the decision that changed everything. Speakman sold his car to pay for a U-Haul truck and moved to California with basically nothing, armed only with a letter of introduction from Lou Angel to Ed Parker. Ed Parker created American Kenpo, this rapid-fire striking martial art that's completely different from the high-kick flashiness you see in most martial arts movies. And Parker had trained Elvis Presley himself. The man was an absolute legend in the martial arts world, not someone you just walked up to and asked for lessons. Speakman showed up at Ed Parker's International Karate Championships in Long Beach with that letter, and when Parker read it, he literally said, "Oh my God, my old friend, this is great," then handed Speakman his home phone number right there on the spot. Training started under Larry Tatum, one of Parker's top students, and Speakman threw himself into learning Kenpo with the same obsessive focus he brought to diving. Around 1985, Ed Parker invited Speakman to his Pasadena home to become one of his last group of personal protégés, which was like being selected by Yoda himself, if we're being honest about the magnitude of that honor. Summer of 1990 brought a fourth-degree black belt promotion directly from Ed Parker's hands, just months before Parker died on December 15th of that same year. Speakman was literally one of the last people Ed Parker ever trained to that level, carrying forward a martial arts lineage that stretched back decades. By this point, Speakman had been taking acting classes in Burbank since around 1986, picking up one tiny film credit from 1988 in some low-budget indie called Side Roads, plus a small role in Van Damme's Lionheart in 1990. His big break was coming, and when it arrived it would seem like everything had aligned perfectly. 1990 brought producer Mark DeSalle into Jeff Speakman's life, and DeSalle signed him to a 4-picture deal that looked like the beginning of something massive. DeSalle had been the producer on Van Damme's early films, so he knew exactly how to build an action star from the ground up, and he saw something in Speakman that convinced him to go all in. Paramount Pictures agreed to write a script specifically for Jeff Speakman, which the studio had never done before for a completely unknown actor. Not once, not ever. They hired screenwriter David Wilson, brought in Ed Parker as the Kenpo technical advisor, and Parker was on set every day, all night, making sure the fighting looked authentic in ways that most martial arts movies never bothered to achieve. The Perfect Weapon had a $10 million budget, which for context was a legitimate theatrical budget for an action movie in 1991. Not some cheap direct-to-video cash grab. The cast featured Mako, James Hong and Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, established actors who brought real weight to their roles, plus Mariska Hargitay from Law & Order SVU, all wrapped in production value that screamed major studio backing. Marc Dessau directed, and this turned out to be his only directing credit ever. While fight choreographer Rick Avery made sure Speakman's Kenpo looked incredible on screen with techniques that had never been showcased quite like this in American cinema. Filming wrapped in fall of 1990, and 3 weeks later, Ed Parker died without ever seeing the completed movie. The film's dedication reads, "This film is dedicated to Ed Parker and the spirit of Kenpo," which hits different when you know Parker spent his final months making sure this movie honored everything he'd built his life around. March 15, 1991, brought the opening weekend that every first-time action star dreams about. The Perfect Weapon pulled in almost $4 million and landed at number 6 at the box office across 1,229 theaters, then went on to gross $14,061,361 domestically by the end of its theatrical run. $14 million on a $10 million budget wasn't a massive smash, but it proved profitability, and more importantly, it proved that Jeff Speakman could open a movie. Reviews landed at 42% on Rotten Tomatoes, but even the negative ones praised Speakman's fighting skills, with the New York Times calling it a macho fantasy of physical control, grace, and invincibility, while the LA Times said the action sequences were crisply staged. Everything lined up perfectly in ways that rarely happen in Hollywood. Speakman had a 4-picture deal with a major studio. His first film made money. His martial arts credentials backed up his on-screen persona. And development was already moving forward on his second film. That second film was being rewritten specifically around Speakman's abilities, with an expensive writer doing tons of rewrites to make it a Jeff Speakman vehicle. The concept involved a bus, and they were adding fight sequences where Speakman would have to get off the bus, fight bad guys, and get back on before everything exploded. Everything was going according to plan, right up until someone at Paramount made the worst administrative decision in modern action movie history. Here's where everything falls apart. And when Jeff Speakman explained this to the action elite years later, the way he described it was genuinely heartbreaking in its simplicity. They hired a writer for a lot of money, and he was doing a lot of rewrites to make it a Speakman movie. And in the middle of that, the interim head of the studio put that script in turnaround. Fox bought it. He could not get it back. They made that movie, which was supposed to be my second movie at Paramount, and the name of that movie was Speed. It was the movie that made Keanu Reeves a star. Let me break down what happened here, because when you lay out the sequence of events, it becomes clear just how insane this situation actually was. Paramount had a script in development, spending serious money rewriting it for Jeff Speakman's specific abilities, when the studio lost its CEO right in the middle of Speakman's deal. An interim head took over, and this person, who Speakman says was not action movie folks and didn't like Dessau, put the Speed script in turnaround, which in Hollywood terms means you're basically saying we don't want this anymore, and someone else can buy it if they want. Fox swooped in and paid $250,000 for the script. Paramount tried to get it back, and Fox refused to sell. Speed came out in 1994 and made $350 million worldwide as the 8th highest grossing film of that year, turning Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock into massive stars. That was supposed to be Jeff Speakman's second movie, the one that would have launched him into the stratosphere alongside Van Damme and Seagal. But instead, it became someone else's career-defining moment. The loss of one script created a cascade of problems that went far beyond just missing out on a hit movie. Interim leadership at Paramount didn't want to make Dessau's movies anymore, and as Speakman explained, when new studio executives come in, They don't want to champion the previous regime's projects because that other group will always get the praise. The studio won't want to make another movie star out of somebody that the preceding group tried to make, Speakman put it. And that philosophy became the death sentence for his theatrical career before it had really begun. Paramount didn't just lose the Speed script. They stopped developing Jeff Speakman's career entirely. DeSalle had a contract dispute with Paramount, and instead of buying him out, the studio just let everything stall, creating a 2-year gap between The Perfect Weapon in 1991 and Speakman's second film Street Night in 1993. 2 years is an eternity in Hollywood, and as Ultimate Action Movie Club pointed out, by the time Speakman got his second movie made, the momentum was completely dead. Those 2 years played out like watching someone drown in slow motion. Jeff Speakman, who just had a profitable theatrical release with a major studio, sat on the sidelines while the action movie market exploded around him with everyone else getting rich. Steven Seagal's Under Siege came out in 1992 and made $156.6 million worldwide. Van Damme's Universal Soldier pulled in $102 million, and his Time Cop in '94 hit $129 million. These guys were printing money with every release, while Speakman waited for Paramount and DeSalle to sort out their drama. 1993 finally brought his second film, Street Night, being made by Cannon Films, which, if you know anything about Cannon at that point in history, was already a massive red flag, because the company was literally on the verge of bankruptcy. Director Albert Magnoli had previously directed Purple Rain, so that credential looked pretty legitimate on paper, and co-star Bernie Casey brought some weight to the cast, but then the money ran out mid-production and everything fell apart. You're 2 weeks into filming, everything is going great, the scenes look phenomenal, and then the suits start showing up on the set and the rest of the money isn't coming. So you have to make these slashes, Speakman described, and you can hear the frustration in how he explained watching a promising project get gutted in real time. Budget cuts devastated the film during production, and the movie that was supposed to be his big comeback ended up looking cheap and rushed. Street Night opened March 12, 1993, and made $841,015 domestically, with some markets sending it straight to video without even bothering with a theatrical release. That moment marked the official death of Jeff Speakman's theatrical career, and what followed was a decade of diminishing returns that would have broken most people. From 1995 to 2000, he made 9 direct-to-video movies: The Expert in '95, Deadly Outbreak in '96, 2 TV movies for Sci-Fi, then Scorpio 1, Land of the Free, Memorial Day, and Running Red, before ending the decade doing a Master P movie called Hot Boys. The Perfect Weapon had a $10 million budget, while most of these direct-to-video movies probably had budgets under $1 million, and the production quality dropped off a cliff. Scripts became generic, directors were mostly journeymen working for hire, and fewer people watched each successive release. One story from The Expert in 1995 tells you everything about how far things had fallen. Director William Lustig, who made the Maniac Cop movies, walked off the set mid-production, allegedly saying, "We had to book 2 plane tickets, one for him and one for his ego," before leaving the project entirely uncredited, while Rick Avery, who choreographed The Perfect Weapon, stepped in to finish directing. Other sources say Speakman was actually a decent actor compared to contemporaries like Seagal, so who knows what really happened on that set. But the point stands that by the mid-90s, Jeff Speakman was stuck in direct-to-video hell, making movies that fewer and fewer people were watching. His last credited film role was Striking Range in 2006, and after that he basically stopped acting entirely. 1991, when The Perfect Weapon came out, represented peak action movie saturation in ways that made breaking through almost impossible for a newcomer. Steven Seagal was basically untouchable at that point. Van Damme dominated the mid-tier theatrical market, and Arnold and Stallone sat at the top of the mountain collecting massive paychecks. Then you had this flood of would-be action stars all fighting for scraps: Mark Dacascos, Brian Bosworth, Gary Daniels, Cynthia Rothrock, Don the Dragon Wilson, and Olivier Gruner. every single one of them with martial arts credentials, and every single one trying to be the next big thing. The market strategy at the time required each martial arts star to have a signature style as their selling point. Seagal had Aikido, Van Damme had kickboxing, and those insane splits. Philip Rhee had Taekwondo, and Jeff Speakman had Kenpo. Kenpo is this rapid-fire punching art that's super effective in real life, but maybe less visually dramatic on screen than a spinning kick to someone's head. And Marc Dassal's directing style, cutting after every punch, might have actually undermined what made Speakman special in the first place. 1994 brought Speed, which proved you didn't even need martial arts to be an action star anymore. Keanu Reeves wasn't a martial artist, just a good-looking actor who could run and look intense, and suddenly every Hollywood pretty boy wanted to do action movies. Christian Slater, Johnny Depp, and Kurt Russell proved you didn't need a thick accent or a kickboxing background to scowl and hold a gun, as one industry observer put it. The martial arts action star boom was basically over by the mid-90s, and Jeff Speakman had missed his window by exactly 2 years because of studio politics that had nothing to do with his talent or potential. Brandon Lee was the rising martial arts star in the early 90s, with The Crow in development, and everyone thinking he was going to be the next Bruce Lee. March 31st, 1993 brought his death in that horrific on-set accident, and The Crow came out posthumously in '94, making $50.7 million. If Brandon Lee hadn't died, he probably would have taken up all the oxygen in the martial arts action star space. But his death didn't help Speakman either. It just left a vacuum that nobody filled because the market had already moved on to a different kind of action hero. Different people have different theories about why Jeff Speakman's career collapsed, and the truth probably involves some combination of all of them. Theory number 1, which Speakman himself believes, is that it was purely studio politics and bad timing beyond anyone's control. The Speed script got away due to an administrative error. Paramount's regime change meant new executives didn't want to champion the previous regime's action star, and Dassal had contract disputes that created a 2-year gap. All of this happened outside Speakman's control, and by the time he got his second movie, the momentum was dead. This theory is probably the most credible, because it's backed up by Speakman's own testimony, and it matches how Hollywood actually works when you understand the political games that happened during regime changes. Theory number 2 suggests Speakman had acting limitations that held him back. Critics consistently praised his fighting while questioning his dramatic presence. With this movie writing, he certainly got movie star looks, but not a ton of charisma. And William Lustig allegedly made that comment about booking 2 plane tickets for Speakman and his ego. Other critics disagreed with this assessment completely, saying that unlike Seagal, Speakman could actually act. So this theory is kind of all over the place without any real consensus. Theory 3 blames poor script selection, pointing to how, after The Perfect Weapon, his movies were just generic action fare with declining budgets. A Rotten Tomatoes user summarized it perfectly when they wrote, "Think we have an answer, he didn't pick the best scripts after The Perfect Weapon." The counter-argument here is that when you're stuck in direct-to-video hell, you don't get to be picky about scripts because you take what you can get to pay the bills. Theory 4 is what I call the Kenpo problem, where some people felt that Kenpo's rapid-fire punching didn't photograph as dramatically as high kicks or throws. The editing style that cut after every strike might have undermined what made Speakman special, and maybe audiences just didn't connect with that fighting style the way they connected with Van Damme doing the splits between 2 trucks. Research revealed 0 evidence of personal scandals, no substance abuse issues, no legal troubles, no behind-the-scenes controversies that could have sabotaged his career. Jeff Speakman wasn't destroying himself. He was just a guy who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong studio politics. Jeff Speakman didn't spiral into bitterness or become one of those washed-up has-beens doing celebrity boxing matches. And that's where the story actually gets kind of beautiful. He went back to what he actually loved, teaching martial arts, and built something that matters in ways Hollywood success never could. Today, Jeff Speakman runs Jeff Speakman's Kenpo 5.0, which he describes as the largest Kenpo organization in history, representing the fifth evolution of American Kenpo that he founded after Ed Parker died. The system took Parker's original curriculum and updated it to include ground fighting techniques that the original lacked, evolving the art for modern combat situations. His World Training Center operates at 8645 West Flamingo Road in Las Vegas, but the organization has franchise schools in about 20 countries, including the US, Mexico, Belgium, France, Greece, Netherlands, Austria, Bolivia, Chile, Germany, and Australia. July 9, 2022 brought promotion to 10th degree black belt, the highest rank possible from Benny Urquidez, another absolute legend who told Speakman he was the first guy he ever promoted to 10th, and will be the last. Speakman also holds a 9th degree black belt in Japanese Goju-Ryu, earned July 2, 2013. Hall of Fame recognition includes Black Belt Hall of Fame Instructor of the Year in 1993, Masters Hall of Fame Silver Life Achievement Award in 2009, and World Martial Arts Hall of Fame inductee. What's really cool is that Speakman became a certified defensive tactics instructor for the US Department of Justice, teaching DEA, FBI, Homeland Security, and Department of State personnel real combat techniques. He also serves as sharp-edge weapons instructor for the California Department of Corrections at Pelican Bay and Folsom prisons. The guy who was supposed to be a movie star is instead training federal agents and corrections officers in actual defensive tactics, which is honestly way more badass than making straight-to-video movies. 2013 brought a throat cancer diagnosis, but Speakman made a full recovery and has become an advocate for cancer survivors in the martial arts community. At 66 years old, he still teaches every night and trains every day according to recent interviews. His last film was in 2006, and in a 2014 interview he mentioned developing a film called Lido with Mickey Rourke and Willem Dafoe attached, but that never got made. His current stance is pretty clear when he says, "I am not in the game of chasing movies anymore. If this is something that would help me and my Kenpo 5-point me, then yes, I would be interested in doing it." Recent media appearances include Scott Adkins' show The Art of Action in 2020, and a few martial arts podcasts. But he's clearly moved on from Hollywood without looking back. When you look at what happened to some other action stars from that era, the substance abuse, the legal problems, the desperate attempts to stay relevant, Jeff Speakman took a completely different path, and honestly that deserves respect. "I just swallowed the jagged pill. It was how things were being done," he told interviewers, and there's no bitterness in his voice when he talks about what happened, just matter-of-fact acceptance of reality. Jeff Speakman's story perfectly illustrates how little control you actually have over your own success in Hollywood. And that's the lesson that sticks with you long after the details fade. He did everything right, trained for years under a legitimate master, got the studio deal, made his first movie profitable, earned critical praise for his fighting skills, and had the looks, the credentials, and the work ethic. None of it mattered when studio politics decided to move in a different direction. One administrative error, someone putting the speed script in turnaround, created a butterfly effect that destroyed an entire career trajectory. If that interim CEO had left the Speed script alone, Jeff Speakman probably becomes a huge star, with Speed making him a household name, leading to better scripts, bigger budgets, and more creative control. Maybe he becomes the American Jet Li, known for bringing authentic martial arts to mainstream action films. Instead, he spent a decade making movies most people have never heard of before, walking away completely. Scott Adkins, who became a huge action star himself, said this about Speakman: "I always remember Jeff Speakman. He did The Perfect Weapon, and I really loved that film. Then it was like every other film he did had less and less martial arts in it, and was quite disappointed about it. And that had a big impact on me." The lesson that future action stars took from Speakman's career wasn't about talent or timing, it was about protecting your fight scenes no matter what. Don't let producers cut your action sequences to save money. Don't let directors edit out what makes you special, and fight for what makes you unique, because once you lose that, you're just another guy in a leather jacket holding a gun. The Perfect Weapon remains the definitive screen showcase for American Kenpo, and if you want to see what that martial art looks like when it's done by a legitimate master, that's the movie to watch. For that alone, Jeff Speakman earned his place in martial arts film history. The beautiful irony is that while Hollywood was busy churning out forgettable Van Damme knockoffs and Steven Seagal clones, Jeff Speakman was building something that actually matters. 20 countries, thousands of students, federal agents trained in real defensive tactics, and a martial arts legacy that extends Ed Parker's work into the 21st century. 2024 brought a Kino Lorber Blu-ray release of The Perfect Weapon, with an HD transfer from a 4K scan, proving there's still an audience for that movie 33 years later. People still want to see that version of Jeff Speakman, the one who could have been a superstar if Hollywood hadn't pulled the plug. Jeff Speakman's career came down to a single sliding doors moment, where everything could have gone differently. In one version of reality, that Paramount executive doesn't put speed in turnaround, and the script gets rewritten for Speakman, with fight scenes on a bus, beating up bad guys while Sandra Bullock drives. The movie makes $350 million worldwide, and Jeff Speakman becomes a household name. In that reality, maybe Van Damme and Speakman become rivals. Maybe Speakman's the one doing the Expendables movies with Stallone. Maybe he's the American martial arts star who bridges the gap between old-school action heroes and the new generation. We don't live in that reality, though. We live in the reality where an administrative error combined with studio regime change and producer conflicts created a 2-year gap that killed all momentum. A guy with every advantage, talent, training, looks, and studio backing ended up making direct-to-video movies that barely anyone saw, and yet somehow, this isn't actually a tragedy. 34 years after The Perfect Weapon, Jeff Speakman is still training every day, still teaching every night, still spreading Ed Parker's martial arts system to 20 countries around the world. He's cancer-free, respected in his field, and made peace with what might have been. That's more than most people who chase Hollywood stardom can say. The next time you watch Speed, think about how it was supposed to be a Jeff Speakman movie, and how one person's decision to put a script in turnaround changed 2 careers forever, giving Keanu Reeves superstardom while sending Speakman to direct-to-video obscurity. Hollywood is brutal like that, where talent isn't enough, timing isn't enough, and even studio backing isn't enough. Sometimes you need every single thing to align perfectly, and if just one domino doesn't fall the right way, the whole thing collapses. Jeff Speakman was supposed to be a superstar with the 4-picture deal, the hit debut, and martial arts credentials that were second to none. Hollywood pulled the plug not because he failed, but because someone in a suit made a clerical error and set off a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. That's the story of how Jeff Speakman's career died, but it's also the story of how he built something even more lasting in its place. And honestly, that might be the better ending after all.